Hi Liliana, welcome and thank you for coming to EcoSecG. So who is Liliana Arroyo?
Thank you for having me. And I'm Liliana Arroyo. I'm from Barcelona. I'm a sociologist. My background is in sociology and I'm a specialist on digital social innovation. And I am currently at the Catalan government as the director for digital society.
Oh, that's very interesting because you know the needs of society. So does society need a new generation of mobile communications?
That's a very good question. And I would answer with another question, which is, it depends, because for what are we aiming for a new generation of connectivity?
Yeah, that's true. People talk about sustainability as a key value that 6G will provide. Do you think sustainability, when we talk about technology, is a relevant, necessary thing?
Definitely, and I think it necessarily needs to go hand in hand. Actually, if we think of the twin transition that the EU is trying to foster, it's about the digital and the green transition. They need to be intertwined, and actually one of the most pervasive aspects of technology is the environmental costs that it can imply, and this is not going to it has not to be a trade-off between the social impact and the green impact, so the environmental impact or sustainability. So definitely these are two conversations that are faces of the same coin.
Yeah, I totally agree. But this has been already addressed by 5G, right? So what can we learn from 5G? Because I understand that 6G will be a kind of a continuation or evolution of 5G. So is there any lesson we can learn from 5G?
I think there are many. But probably we can start thinking about how the 5G connectivity has allowed us to connect better all parts of the world. And if we take a look at the figures, what we see that, according to the recent reports by the GSMA, is that 45% of the population, it's not yet connected to the network or to a meaningful connectivity. So it's okay because in some parts of the world we already have 5G in our smartphones or in our pockets, but in some spots of the world they still doesn't have 3G. So that's.
So when we talk about Catalonia, has 5G contributed to closing this gap? I mean, when we talk about this 45%, the situation in Catalonia is similar to this? Do we have this gap of coverage?
No, the amount is different. So I would say that in terms of connectivity, 5G it's not fully covering the whole country, but 4G it's covering 90-something%, so almost 100. But the interesting thing is that, and it's also related to what kind of lessons learned can we take away from the 5G deployment, is that the importance, it's not connectivity only, but if we think in terms of digital divide, we need to take into account that connectivity is only the very first step.
Yeah.
The digital divide is also about the usage gap. The capacitation gap, so the knowledge of using these in a fluent way and in an empowered way, which is like the higher status that we could think of a mature digital society.
It's very interesting that you bring this topic because it's true, we don't have to talk about technology, but the usage of technology. So in this sense, what do you think are the use cases or the scenarios where technology, this communication technology, can bring value? Which are the vertical sectors or the actors in the society that can benefit from this connectivity?
I would say that if we can imagine a horizon in which information and the capacity of gathering data, I mean, in terms of developing sensing cities, for instance, right? Which is one of the promises that we have related to the 6G or even to some extent with 5G. So having sensing cities could be useless if we are, not focusing the correct questions. And my question would be, for instance, how can 6G can help us to foster empathy, or can help us to foster, better connections between people, or mutual understanding, or overcoming cognitive biases, right? So to what extent having all this information, or even the ability to have digital twins of any corner of the world, it's not only about the territory or only about infrastructure, but also about empowering or augmenting our humanity.
Yeah, that's super interesting that you talk about that. Sometimes we have the impression that from the technology side, we develop technology without having society or the human being in the middle, because at the end is the center of everything. What is the role of the administration to make sure that this happens, that the technology we develop is useful for human beings in the end.
That's actually the duty of public administration, I would say, because public administration has the responsibility to take care of the social impact of it and to find a better way to promote social well-being, and not only in terms of welfare state, but also, without leaving no one behind, and so on. So public administration needs to be at the forefront of technological development, which is something which is difficult nowadays, because the public administration in different levels, so local or regional or at state level, they have many fronts of action. But I would say that, for instance, public procurement, it's an important instrument that we can fine-tune in order to promote certain technological development or not. So I would say that we have to not forbid. I mean, of course, there's a part of regulation which is important, and there are many debates going on that side. But I would say that we need to incentivize in a proactive way, in a constructive way, in a positive way, those use cases and examples that can be role models for how can we develop technology in a sense that it's empowering us as humans and as communities. And I think that this is a responsibility of public administration. On the one hand, because we can have like an overview that probably the private sector cannot have, that probably the academy on their side cannot have, or the society at large cannot have. And I think that public administration needs to be that facilitator of conversational spaces about having the important questions right at the center. Questions and needs, social needs and public value have to be at the center of it.
Wow, that's excellent. And I guess that also public administration has a role of regulation, right? Especially now in these times that we talk about artificial intelligence all over the place. I understand that this is going to be a game changer, a disruptive technology. So how do you see society? Is society ready for this disruption, this hyperconnectivity with 6G, artificial intelligence all over the place? Are we ready for that? What changes, what societal changes are we expecting or do we need?
I don't think that society is ready, but I would say that either the developers of this kind of technologies are ready yet. We can think of 1 year ago, 1,000 people, signing a petition about, a kind of pause in technological development in terms of, with relation to AI and so on. Now we are having an AI regulation in place soon at the European level and so on. And I don't think that no one can feel or can sense that they are completely ready, because we don't have a magic ball to foresee the future. We can play with scenarios, and what we need to work on, I think, it's precisely on defining what is the scenario that we want to go for. So we need an horizon towards we can walk to. And I think that the question that you're asking, it's really relevant, but because it's not only about verticals of technology, it's not about quantum computing, it's not about AI, it's not about 6G, it's about how all these together can generate disruptive changes. Of course, one of the most evident, automation or dangers in terms of workplace laws and so on. But again, I think that we need to get back to basics. So for being a human, what's important? The important thing is to be and to belong. That's it. That's what makes us happy. That's what everyone in every age of the history and in every corner of geographies need. Be and belong, and having a community where they are part of. So again, I think that technology needs to put this in place, because every technological disruption or innovation which is detached from values, it's, I think, forgetting that values are embedded in everything we do. So what we need to do is to assume that and to decide which kind of values are we going to embed in technology. So ethics and societal impacts cannot go at the end of the conversation. And one of the things that I think it's interesting beyond regulation or with regulation, it's also the importance to include citizens in the loop of it. Yeah. So for instance, to advance in terms of universal design in order to make every technology more inclusive and more equitable, in terms of no leaving no one behind. And not generating new barriers, which is something really important also in terms of, in digital divide, and also in this matter of ensuring that also the wealth that is created after these all technological developments and so on also has like a safety net, or a new deal, which is helping us to understand how can we create wealth but also redistribute this wealth among every citizen.
Yeah, because you were talking before about the future we are drawing together, right? Where we are thinking of a new future based on this technology, and when we do that, we can go wrong or we can go right? So when we put the human at the center and we put technology on top of that, there are some threats and some opportunities, right? So when we think about this new technological future, what do you think are the key threats that we are facing and the key opportunities? What are the risks and what are the benefits that we have to bear in mind?
One thing is the battle between humans and machines. I would say this is one of the risks, of one of the cognitive biases we need to understand and to reimagine a little bit, and in this sense, I think that the Japanese government has a good example on that, because they talk about innovation as moonshots, and it's nothing about going to the moon, but to draw this kind of mission. So it's mission oriented, and also, for instance, they are imagining how can we cohabit with robots. So robots are not an enemy or are not someone or something that is going to replace us, but instead of that are there our companions or our assistants, And I think that, for instance, with ChatGPT, this conversation is starting to be on the table as well. So one of the risks, one of the threats, it's this ideal of eliminating humans because there are machines coming. So I don't think that needs to be the case. And on the positive side, I think that we have a nice story of collaboration or cooperation, I would say, that we can write together.
But it's natural to have this reluctance to change, right? You're afraid of what's coming new.
Yeah, exactly. And also another aspect that I think that it's important that we can rethink again, it's we have been raised in a society that it's thinking about risks and how mitigate risks. And I think that now the approach needs to be how can we live in an uncertain context, which is uncertain all the time, and we don't know how many uncertainties are coming. So I think that again, it's so the lifeline across all these decades of digital disruption that we are living and that we are going to be living, it's the values. So putting values at the core. There's a report which is assessing the impacts of 6G in several sectors like health or humanitarian aid or smart cities and so on. But the nice part of this report, what makes is to take the SDGs framework, and then they connect several spheres of key values, key societal values, and the impact that this 6G is going to have in that. So I think that the departure, screen needs to be these value-centered design.
I think this is a very nice conclusion for our talk. So 6G has to be designed with the values, human values, at the very center of the design.
Exactly. It's not only a matter of creating standards for radio spectrum, but the standards for 6G should encompass all the societal values and impacts, sustainability, digital divide, and so on.
Wow, amazing, Liliana. So I think this is a very nice way to conclude our talk today. It has been a pleasure to have you with us. Best of luck for the future. Thank you very much.
Good luck for you all, because we are all in this.
Yeah.